Hello, check, check.
Hello, hello, hello,
Goth
hello, hello. Goth.
Yearbook.
Goth Yearbook. Great. I love it. Um all right. Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of Goth Yearbook After Hours. It is I, your host, as always, Eric, aka the Eric Wynn. And with us, as always, is our hostess with the mostest, Caitlin, aka the Caitlin D. Caitlin, how is it going?
It's going great, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. For those who will not be watching or listening to this live, we are recording this Sunday, November 8th in 2020, for those who are listening way in the future. And it's
Ooh.
been about 24, almost 48 hours now since the election more or less has been called for Joe Biden after a very interesting and one could say long week of election stuff going on in the country. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting time to be recording during an already very chaotic and interesting year, to say the least.
Yeah. I don't need there's so many directions I could go with that.
Right?
Yeah, I mean people have definitely been celebrating. A lot of people have been like still kind of scared. I saw someone I just like read a tweet where someone was like it feels like like the main character just killed the monster, but there's still 20 minutes left in the movie. So you're like, uh, like,
Right.
what are these 20 minutes gonna be like?
That's great.
Um,
I didn't see that, but that's great.
but I
That's
also
accurate.
like, I'm trying so hard, and I think I was talking to someone about this today. Like, I think the collective lesson and my personal lesson right now, it's like, if you don't have control over it, don't worry about it right now. And if there's something you can control, like if you can be a nicer person, if you can work on your own, internalize, uh, capitalist or racist or sexist or narcissist or whatever it is, like you have control over that. You can't control Donald Trump. You can't control, you know, any of these huge corporations or billionaires or anything. And, you know, it should be a relief because you don't, none of us, what would we do about it? I don't know, but we can like affect small changes like directly around us and within our own souls.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a one. There's you're right. There is so many different things that can be spoken about. And maybe we'll have to kind of set a full episode aside to really dig deep into all the various crevices that were created throughout this election process. But I will say, speaking of small changes they can make, what one of the really empowering, one of the really awesome things to see was just like across the board, people's voices really were being heard and affected, like at the community level, especially here, like in Sonoma County. We got to pass a lot of measures that I think really were born out of the BLM protests that happened back in May and June, especially one that is going to hold our, quote unquote, it's going to hold our local sheriff's department accountable. And they're basically asking for complete and total transparency, both in like their public spending and in how they're going to be doing arresting procedures. So
Mm-hmm.
it's and that's just here in Sonoma County. Of course, like across the whole entire nation. I saw something about how every single congressional Democrat that was against Medicare for all did not win their seat, but every single congressional Democrat that was for Medicare for all won their seat. I feel like there's so many of those kind of little things that were happening throughout the election in the last couple of days that I think you're seeing as I guess, and of course, there was a lot of stuff that was unfortunate to see, which was, how many people were, I guess, kind of voting for things that maybe
Yeah.
were not progressive by no means, but it was great to see how those that do want to affect certain progressive policies, how it was across the line for what they wanted. Especially when I read that
Well,
stat, that was very interesting to me.
I think I because I have been hearing that a lot this week. The sort of like people are so disappointed and upset that like there was such a turnout for Trump that it wasn't just, I mean, and it did end up being obviously more like a huge projected win for Biden. But I've been spending time on the internet, like not on Facebook, not on like actual news media sources, but like on like conservative Reddit, like subreddits. And I like Reddit. I've talked about this on the show, but I like Reddit for news because you can actually see people's comments who are like from the cities and places where things are going down. And so it's
Right.
like you get actual feedback from people that are live there. Um, and what's been interesting about the conservative Reddit and like learning about it, it's like, and it's such a reminder, like, yeah, I know on the surface, like, it does feel like this huge polarity between like, people who are, and yes, like there are the white supremacists in that and whatever, but I think for the most part, it's almost like they're accusing Democrats of being all the things that Democrats are accusing them of, but there's just like
Oh,
they're flipping it. And it's like, and it's the whole, yes, there's the QAnon, but there's also people that just genuinely think that like they fucking hate Donald Trump, his person. That's a huge thing. They don't like his personality, but they think of it as like employing him, and he is, and they like appreciate his foreign policy and this and that. And like there are ways you can look at different things that he's done during his administration. And I mean, if you really want to find stuff that he's done that's been good, you can find it. He's been in office for 4 years, so, and it's not a complete. It's kind of hard to be a president in America and just fucked it up all by yourself. And he's done a hell of a job, but at the same time, we do have a system with checks and balances. But if you go on these forums, people are like, the conservatives all think that the Democrats are the ones trying to, you know, be divisive and be hateful, and they all are like really patting themselves on the back right now for not rioting.
yeah. I
um
I did see that. I did see. I actually saw that earlier today, which kind of cracked me up. We've talked a lot on the show, and I still to this day maintain that like I know it's very hard, especially with sometimes the rhetoric that can be spread, certainly by our president and by many of his followers, that is hateful and that does condone certain sort of violence. Maybe not necessarily outright, but certain, they always say like certain keywords, things like that. But I do
like
always say
grab
like,
them by the pussy.
yeah, I do always say that like I do think, and I'm trying to kind of keep positive tonight, but like I do think that we'll forever be stuck in a certain cycle if we just, and I mean this like across party lines, if you just refuse to ever acknowledge like any sort of humanity of anyone
Yeah.
who opposes what you view. I feel like you're doomed to forever be stuck in this holding pattern, because it's just you're going to constantly only know an echo chamber of sorts. And what that means, in my opinion, is that it's just going to always be us versus them.
Yeah, like don't fat shame Donald Trump. Don't comment on, like, don't say he is a micro penis. It's like you wouldn't want, like if your vision is for a more inclusive dynamic in the world and a more like, empathetic and kind society, then yeah, you have to look at your own behaviors, and rather than jumping to conclusions about people that, yes, and obviously ideology is totally different when you're like, when it's people that are like, uh it's so complicated because it does feel so violent and threatening when someone is like upholding a leader that like you see as fascist, you see as this white supremacist person, but in their eyes, it's like, I just think you can't call someone out for not being uh like empathetic and trying to understand someone else's experience if you're not trying to do the same thing.
Mm.
And it's obviously very hard, and but I do think that that's like a big part of sort of like, making America great for the very first time.
Yeah.
Rather than, again, just like people coming together, and rather than like focusing on, it's such a cliche, but rather than focusing on our differences, trying to figure out what we have in common. And I know we've spoken to this on the show before, but most people that are in hate groups, it's like they're the people that just have been sort of marginalized, and so they're trying to find a community, and it's like if they have people that are further antagonizing them, it just makes them more and more violent and more aggressive, and also feeling more justified in their ideology
Y-
and more victimized.
yeah, well, and my sister has always she I forget where she heard this, but basically she does have a certain kind of like think about the ears and how they receive information. Like, do ears receive information when they're being like scolded and yelled at and talked down to? And that does circle back to the what you were just saying, and to my thought on like trying to see the humanity is like if someone does get to this place where they are upholding someone who has rhetoric like that and they're defending it, or at the very least they're like saying, well, it's being misinterpreted, or they are fully buying into like, well, it's being skewed by the media, they don't mean that. You have to think like what pushed them to that place then, like where is it that they felt that they were not being seen in their community. And I'm not here to like say like every single person, there, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of them where it's because it because they're
Yeah,
it
we're not
feeds
saying
into
like
their
go
yeah.
hug a Trump supporter.
And
It's
plenty of
just
them they're all behind because he supports like a capitalistic like nation that they are totally bought and sold into, and it helps like their own personal agenda, which how much can you really speak to someone like that. But I think that you and I are both kind of speaking to maybe like a different kind of follower, someone who might be someone who was all in a certain sort of lower income bracket, who somehow thinks that he and his plans were going to uplift them somehow. The other thing that I really quickly wanted to touch on was you had said kind of in the beginning how like you feel like sometimes you don't see like a similarity, and I agree. Don't get me wrong. Um, I would have preferred a much more progressive, far left presidential candidate, of course, ultimately, rather than like one who's a little bit more centrist, or a lot more centrist, I should say. But it's so funny because the response that I saw from so many left leaning liberals to Biden's ultimate victory was, it was almost as if they would have preferred that Trump would have won. And I can't help but feel like that's because they were, I guess, because then they feel like they would have been vindicated and been like, see, like, this is why, let's call it, like, let's say it was Bernie Sanders or whoever, this is why he should have been nominated.
well, there's
And
a lot of sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say is I can't help but feel like 4 years ago, if Trump, that's how I feel like a lot of Trump supporters would have felt if Trump hadn't ultimately gotten the party nomination. If it went to some like kind of more center road guy like Ted Cruz, I feel like that's the exact same response he would have gotten, was like a bunch of guys on the internet, and let's call them guys because it would have been more or less a bunch of like dudes in their 20s getting all riled up because they would have been like they would have preferred then that Cruz almost didn't get the nomination. They would have preferred that it would have gone to Hillary or something like that, because then they would have been vindicated. Which to me, I don't know, that then get that to me like it's just, it gets to a certain point where
There's
it's like, are you just like, do you want to be right for the purpose of being right rather than like what you're
yeah,
standing
no,
for?
a lot of people would rather be right than happy. And I do think that right now it's an important time, yes, to keep pushing towards the like the things that we want to see in society. But to do that, we have to be focused on those things and not the
Mm-hmm.
things that we find wrong with society. And we've said that. I mean, I feel like I say that all the time on this podcast. However, we are not a political podcast. And speaking of attempting to understand other people and just immerse ourselves in other perspectives, it is Native American Heritage Month, and I actually didn't really think about that when I booked our guest tonight. I just had seen that he came out with the book, and I've been following his Instagram for a little bit because his writing is really cool. Eric, you have I feel like you prepared the intro, so I don't want to step on your toes here.
Tonight's guest is an enrolled member of the Ponca tribe of Nebraska. They have written a book on Native spirituality called The Memory of Souls, a book of short stories about the stand for water and standing rock called Standing Rock Stories, as well as a memoir about coming of age in Nebraska called Special Dogs. They currently reside in Astoria, Oregon. I want to welcome to the show, please, thank you so much for coming on, Mr. Cliff Taylor. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I am, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I wouldn't want to spend my Sunday night doing anything but hanging out with you.
Ah,
Hell yeah.
At least
Alex.
this Sunday night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not required to come on every Sunday.
How you doing, sir?
uh, I'm doing really good. I'm doing really good for a lot of different reasons. For a lot of the reasons that everyone else might be, or a lot of other people might be celebrating this weekend, but also in the personal domain, my girlfriend and I moved into a nice, cozy little house this past week. And
Congratulations.
thank you. We're kind of happily relaxing into this new space. And it's something that we've been kind of hoping for a long time. And now it feels really great to be actually in the reality of it.
That's great. It's especially like a perfect time of year to be like nesting too.
Totally, totally. I feel like we've actually got we were in a very funky, cool apartment near downtown, and my girlfriend works from home, and we were kind of, I think, starting to just like overcrowd the space. And
Hmm.
some friends of ours here in Astoria, they had been looking for a place for a long time, and they kind of found their dream property on the other side of the country, and we wound up moving into their home, and now we feel like we have room to grow, room to kind of
Hmm.
grow all these things that have kind of accumulated in our accumulated around us while we've been here about a year and a
Yeah,
half.
I think all the time during quarantine about people who, because I'm home a lot anyway. I've always done quite a bit of work from home, but not all the time. But I can't imagine for people where like maybe two people had a job where neither of them were home all day, and now suddenly everyone's home all day, and it's just like I what a shift that would be if you're like, because a lot of people like they don't even, if someone works, like 50, 60 hours a week, and then like they travel a lot maybe or something, and then suddenly like you're home all the time, like they might not have even moved into a place that they really like all that much.
True.
Well, it's been 2020 has been infinitely tricky, and we're happy to have the good fortune of this new place, this new house.
Well, that's awesome. And it's like hot off the heels too of coming out with your new book, The Memory of Souls, uh, which I finished like the other night, and was really it's like such good timing to be reading that book. And I know Eric's is still on the way, but he's been reading your blogs and whatnot. Eric, did you want to start with Will's question, or do you want to jump into any of your own?
Yeah, we can. This is friend of the show, Will Damon. He called in a question on the hotline. I'm gonna play it right now.
Hey guys, it's Will. I'm calling in to have a question for Cliff. I wanted to see if Cliff noticed a big shift this year, noticeably more than last year, uh, with abolishing the celebration of Columbus Day and shifting it more towards a native celebration. A lot of family members I have and friends of mine didn't even mention it, and it was the first year that I actually noticed there wasn't advertisements for Columbus Day, and I just wanted to see how he felt about that and if he noticed a big shift this year. All right, guys, have fun. Bye.
I like to have fun at the very end.
Yeah, have fun.
Drive safe, guys.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the question. I actually grew up in Columbus, Nebraska, which is named after Christopher Columbus. And in middle school, we were all considered discoverers. Like that's what our team mascot identity was.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, you know, there's, I think when a native person is talking about any given thing, there's so much history that is present. And so the challenge becomes how to compress that so you can get to the point. And I would like to say that, I've been out. I've spent the first 35 years of my life in Nebraska, and now I've kind of been bopping and rambling around for the past 4 years. And I was in Lincoln, Nebraska for the last 15 years that I was in Nebraska. And you know, when on Columbus Day, there would be a handful or a smattering of us that would protest on the main street in front of the federal building, and there would be like 5 to 10 of us. And we showed up every year, we kept coming every year, and it didn't seem to be clicking with enough of the consciousness of the place to create the change that we would have liked to have seen. But over time, that did change, and Lincoln, Nebraska now celebrates Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus. And I think, like, culture wide, we're watching people become more aware in general, but when it comes to Indigenous reality and Indigenous people, people are picking up, I think, on the values, the soul, the spirit, the beauty, the cultural integrity of, I want to say our people, but I mean, I can't speak for all tribes, but speaking about tribes and tribal reality, people feel that because there's still so much humanity present in our culture. Our culture is flush and illuminated with what is beautiful about humanity. And people feel that because they have feeling hearts. No matter how much crap or conditioning or programming gets piled onto the human heart, there's an ocean of innate intelligence there that can feel that. And so I think people feel that when they see, stuff on social media or stuff in the news, and that feeling guides them to want to become more aware of what Indigenous reality is. And I think people are carrying trauma. They want to be healed. And when they see big groups of people that are full of beauty, full of humanity, full of poetry, they want to be a part of seeing those people get some healing. And they comprehend how Indigenous Peoples Day can be a way that we all participate in, righting a wrong that kind of super saturates the culture, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I love that. And I thought about this a lot when I was reading your book, and I recently had read I wish I could remember it's the author's name right now, but it's the mist filled path, and it's this guy who is Scottish Irish heritage, and he's discussing basically like rediscovering his own connection to, like, pre colonialist, like Scotland and Ireland, and the Druids and Celtish religions, and a lot of, a lot of like white people also come from these like lost religions that have been suppressed by other white people and by people of other cultures, and regardless of race, but like we all can, like, pretty much anyone could like trace their ancestry back to a time where like people were practicing rituals on their own, and it wasn't something that was separated by religious organizations to control populations, or capitalist organizations. Um and people had more connection to their own spirit. And uh we've talked a lot on this podcast about, like, just, how much of that has been programmed out of us. It's like we're sort of taught to dismiss our dreams. And if you looked at any indigenous culture in the world, or a lot of the older earth-based religions that have been, mostly wiped out, like, dreaming is hugely important. You would never write off the things in your dream as like, oh, it's just like psychological nonsense of my brain processing everything I saw on that day. It's like life is so much more magical than we are taught to believe, because that magic is self-empowering, and we're not taught to be self-empowered. So I think, and you do touch on this in Memory of Souls, and there's a passage that if we get to it, I'll read later, but I think the reason so many people are like waking up to this consciousness and like being more interested in indigenous practices and experiences is, yeah, because there's like a resonance there where it's like, we, you know, for me, I have like Irish or whatever, so it's like I might, that's like too far for me to connect with right now, just literally getting there. um but there is something interesting about like looking into, okay, well, what did people practice on the land that I inhabit now, where I was born, you know, like, because now this is where I live, this is my country, and what's been practiced here, and what are these, you know, how can I connect with where I'm at? So I know people are just like really thirsty for that, and it's a growing sort of movement. And I think you do a really good job of speaking to that in the book, while like just through your own like in a very personal way.
Oh, thank you. Um, I just I feel like we have so much to learn from each other. We have so much to teach each other. It's such a beautiful thing to connect with another person in such a way that you're both growing more of what you both love inside of each other. And then you watch that kind of ripple backwards into their family and their relationships, and ripple outwards into the community, and then, you know, ripple beyond where you can see into the collective. And I just feel like so many themes present themselves when we really get to talk about these things that are really on our minds. And I think one of the themes is, you know, all is not lost for anybody. We can just begin digging right where we are, and we'll begin to find uh, a better kind of gold than has been worshipped for the past millennia or whatever. And it's the kind of gold that creates quality of life. It's the kind of gold that translates, and people that speak our language get, and people that don't speak our language get it too. And you know, we can start wherever we are and just find, you know, richness. You know, we can just start peeling back the layers, whether it's like, you know, this new house that I'm in, and you start to kind of dig into it and find the history and find the ancestry of the owners and find the big mythological life stories that led to their caring for this place and looking to have, you know, like-hearted people inhabit this place and continue the spirit of this place, or, you know, whatever, you know, we uh, I think in digging where we are, we discover what we have to dig with. We got bodies to dance, and mouths to sing, and hands to write, and eyes to appreciate the beauty of the earth, and hearts that have an innate knowing when it comes to, you know, I think that the ultimate underlying purpose of love that's mysteriously hidden everywhere, you know.
Mm.
So I'm happy to talk about this stuff. And I think when we talk about this stuff, we just start, you know, creating we create the space for insight, we create the space for healing, we create the space for the growth of community. So I love talking about this stuff. And I mean, I love listening to what you guys were talking about at the beginning too, you know, and feeling myself in like the learner space, you know, just kind of catching new things.
I uh I will say, from kind of reading some of your stuff that I could find online, including some of your writings that you have on your website, uh, I could tell that you have such an appreciation for expression of all kind, including especially that of storytelling and of singing. We just a few weeks ago we did a special episode on the children's book series, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And in the very first book of that series, there's like a whole introduction where the writer because all it is he's just taking lots of folklore, urban legends, and he's just kind of like regurgitating them for children in a certain kind of way. But the first, I never had read it before until we did that special episode. But the whole forward is the author just talking about like basically gushing about like the art of storytelling, and he even gives like a little like quick little like this is how you should purposely tell stories. And I loved it because I so like with that already on my mind, it was so captivating to read like a lot of your work and see you just like kind of like touching upon like your own love of storytelling. And it was really neat because it's there feels like both like a sort of like traditional aspect to it and a modern unique take to it, especially because I like the titles of your blog posts. Long and pulled up reflections from a horror movie loving punk Indian, which I love that. It's just so endearing to me that that's like what you title it. And I could see like it seems like from like the ones I'd read, it was like you were taking, it seems like you open yourself and allow yourself to like see beyond just like the mundane and what's happening around you. You see kind of that there's maybe like something spiritual happening in mundane moments. And I felt I was really captivated reading, like little excerpts from your life and seeing like how you seem to just like that's how your mind works is that you're just kind of like constantly, it seems like, seeing beauty and value in all the moments.
Well, I, you know, I want, it's like if I were to line up on this little desk uh, all the things that I felt like most lucky to have happened in my life, and then kind of take those things and the things that I felt among those things that I really feel lucky to have experienced, and then kind of place them in the center. One of the things in the center would be how when I was younger, I got to listen to uh, elders uh, share from their life. And, you know, just listening to them would change you permanently, you know? And their stories were so grand to my young ears. And everything that they shared felt so magical, funny, like overflowing, intricate, poetic to me. And I think we all have a storyteller inside of us, and it gets like sparked by listening to someone else who has their storytelling fire like alive. And the storyteller inside of us can always integrate anything that happens into the place of understanding inside of us. And that place of understanding is where we have peace, healing, empowerment, the ability to connect with anything that is around us, the ability to know what action we can take no matter what's happening in front of us. Like the storyteller inside of us understands. And I think it's just my love for listening to them share all of these epic stories that like reached back to the beginning of time, or maybe just reached back to last week when they were bumping into an old drinking friend of theirs, or like reached back just into the night where they were encountering things I'd only daydreamed about or heard of when I was a little kid or something. Uh, I just loved it, and my passionate love for all of that was, it became like medicine for me, to get over all my own shit, and to help me get over a lot of the shit that wasn't mine that I was kind of, waking up underneath like a 800-pound, blanket of bullshit, basically. you know the passion gave me strength, and it
Yeah.
all came from listening to them because their soul was so damn big, and they knew how to express it in the stories that they told.
It's interesting because I mean I'm kind of envious of that experience because like I really didn't have a close family or like many older people that I don't know were talking about anything that like talking to me in that way, or like telling stories. But I was reflecting while you were talking, like, we as humans are just so obsessed with stories. Like, we have Instagram stories, we have television shows, we have podcasts, we have, like this podcast, we sit here and usually just end up on tangents, and we tell stories about our lives. And that's what I like listening to. And I listen to podcasts. Like, we really can't get enough as human beings, and it's so important to, like, both connecting with our larger stories, like kind of what Eric was saying about your writing, how, like, being able to take a step back and see the story of your life in a certain way, and give meaning to the wind picking up in a moment, or seeing a certain kind of bird, or whatever it is. But then also, yeah, digesting them in smaller pieces, and then, like, what telling each other stories does, like, as far as creating an impact in our society and connecting people and giving each other empathy for each other's experiences. And you know um so it's just interesting that that's become such a focal point of this conversation, because I was literally just sitting here thinking, like, everything's a story like that we do right now. It's like people, yeah, we can't get enough of it, it seems.
Well, I think listening to you, I suddenly like think like the magic of a story is that it can do anything. You know, a story is not limited in terms of what it can accomplish when it comes to an impact or, the effect. Like a story can lift spirits, a story can comfort, a story can educate, a story can give something to someone that they won't use until 50 years later when they're having the hardest time of their lives.
Mm.
A story can give something to someone um, that they may never think they may never think they will use, and then it will suddenly become the most valuable thing that they possess in that moment. Like a story is limitless in what it can become for another person. And if that's not the definition of magic, I don't know what is. And the fact that every single walking human being on earth possesses the ability to share stories and make stories and tell stories. And I think it's just like a byproduct of us, just like, the hair grows out of our head. I think stories spill out of our being constantly. So I guess that's another testament to the kind of kick ass magical fucking creatures that we actually really all are.
Well, and speaking of magical creatures, I do want to bring up. So while I was reading, uh, Memory of Souls, I was like, so that book, basically, you kind of dedicate it to the little people. Which, for listeners at home who are not familiar with this word, you talk about them in this way where it's like, and I've seen it before in literature. I've never spoken to someone firsthand who has seen, like, little people who are kind of related to, like, it's sort of loosely related to, like, no, I don't want to say fairies, but like the fae, or like, like people, there's these creatures in nature and in stories that we tell, but you have this very, like, kind of solid relationship with them, where you see them and you consider them to be helpers, and sort of like, do you want to speak about them a little bit? Because I feel like I'm gonna butcher it. It's so personal to you, and I'm always envious when anyone has some sort of, like, supernatural or not supernatural, but like clear spiritual vision, and connection with things that are tangible like that. So I'd love to hear you speak on that a little bit.
Uh, well, there are so many things that are regular, everyday, and real to our people that might seem far out or unbelievable or unreal, or as my grandpa once said in a play when I was like 10 years old, hogwash, you know? But to us, anything that you experience regularly, you know, takes on realness. and if other people aren't experiencing it, there's probably a reason why they're not experiencing it. And to my people, this planet we're all living on, is our mother. She's a spirit. You can pray to her, you can talk to her, and you can have a relationship with her. To my people, our ancestors, they're real and they're with us. They're caring for us. They visit us. They come to us in our ceremonies. They can do countless different things. They can help us out in miraculous ways. They can help us out in mundane ways. To our people, visions and dreams are not things to be forgotten or hidden, hidden away like something shameful, but to be embraced and carried and utilized for the good of the people and for the good of life. And to my people, there are other spirits that come to us too. And some of those spirits might be like the Bigfoot, and some of those spirits might be like these little people. And the reality of the little people is not unique to members of the Ponca tribe of Nebraska, a tribe that the majority of people have never heard of. The reality of the little people is alive worldwide in the global consciousness of the leprechaun, in the global consciousness of gnomes, in the global consciousness of the Keebler elves. These little beings, these spirits, uh, you can probably take a walk around your neighborhood and you'll see that humanity has remembered them so well, despite the fact that it looks like they've forgotten them totally, that people's doorways, gardens, stoops, car windows, they're anything a person owns or possesses, you might find a little gnome there. And that's because on a deeper level, people remember these beings and they're not just remembering something from long ago, but they're actually remembering uh, little beings that are influencing the story of their lives, the reality of their lives, up until this present moment. And we Indian people, we know about them, and it's because they still come to us so much. If you have a little person come to you in, say, 15 dreams when you're in your teenage years, and they give you a whole bunch of information that becomes crucial for surviving the intergenerational trauma and historical grief that is killing your people. These little people, they're not make believe, because make believe stuff isn't what gives you uh, the stuff that enables you to survive and grow up and mature and become a man and embody the values of your ancestors and embody the compassion that the most beautiful and heroic elders you had the chance of knowing in your life have embodied. So to me, these little people are something like that. And they don't just hang around in Nebraska. They don't just hang around here in Astoria because a guy who experiences them happened to move here. They're pretty much everywhere. And all you need is someone who's experienced them to talk about them. And a lot of people who have had experiences of them and a lot of people who carry memories of them will suddenly start to remember things that maybe they forgot. And they'll go for a walk in their local woods and they'll sense them, hear them, see them, feel them. And these little people, they're ancient lovers of the earth. They're ancient caretakers of life. They're ancient relatives of all tribes. And they're really cool because they love art. They're really cool because they love singing. They're really cool because they love sacred culture. They're really cool because they love stoking the fires of ancestral remembrance inside the human heart. They're really cool because they like to spread magic, spread cheer, spread joy, and they're really cool because they know how to engineer everything they do towards the goal of healing. And we're in a time that is desperate for healing, and not one kind of healing, and not 100 kinds of healing, but as many kinds of healing as there's probably people walking around.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck
So
yeah.
I wrote this little book about the little people to help others feel good about themselves, especially if they've had experiences of little people. And I wrote this book for a lot of other reasons too. But I'm glad you asked me about them because I like to talk about them so that people can feel some of their spirit, maybe.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I've just found it really interesting because uh throughout my life, like when I was very young, I had a lot of past life memories. I had this like very determined sense of like I didn't feel like a little girl. I was like life is magical and it's so frustrating to be like trapped in this weird mundane and I'm starting over. I have to learn everything now and like what the heck? Like what?
Mhm.
And I remember I was obsessed with Alice in Wonderland because the idea of like going down a rabbit hole and ending up in this whole other world, like, and maybe part of it was just my family was fucked up, so I wanted to like escape reality and whatever. But I think part of it also was like, there was this sense of wanting to like leave the mundane and go into something, and I didn't have that sort. I had such a like, very like cynical like it was liberal but it was like my family like went to church and it was you're taught like witchcraft isn't real and magic isn't real but like Jesus was the son of God and for some reason that's normal and then it's just this weird paradigm that the like average I think sort of like young American goes through growing up and you're not taught to like have your own spirituality or whatever. And I remember I one time like before I went to bed, I think I wrote I've journaled always throughout my life and I think I wrote like I was so desperate for an entrance like a portal into another world that I was like if magic is real when I wake up tomorrow, I'm gonna find a door to another world in the back of my closet. And when it wasn't
Self
there, I was
ultimatums.
yeah. I was so upset when it wasn't there. And it was the beginning of like really the collapse of my belief for a really long time as a young person. And I didn't really rediscover and I became very like I was one of those annoying people that think science is reality and like or the only reality and I didn't have my mind open back up to spirituality again until I was like in my early 20s and just had enough strange or unexplainable experiences and then my dreaming opened up and then that led me down a whole spiritual path that was totally different but there was this huge gap in between where I just thought everything was boring basically and meaningless and I was very much kind of a nihilist I guess and I have a lot of friends still who are nihilists and it's like it's interesting how hard it is to like you have to so like I'll meet people still that like don't think that there's anything to dreams for instance or whatever and it's like I have to remind myself okay well I sought out spiritual experiences to a certain extent and I've spent time in nature by myself I've spent time learning how to meditate and connect with these things and create that connection but one of the questions I wanted to ask you before I ramble forever is when it comes to meditation, I thought it was interesting you kind of glossed over it a little bit, but you said that when you were 18 uh you were taught to meditate basically like through some sort of inner knowing. And the way you described your meditation process was a little interesting in the book, but I would love for you to speak to that now because I've been meditating for like over 10 years and I still feel like sometimes I'm just like not doing it right and sometimes it works great for me but
Mhm.
sometimes I'm also like my mind's all over the place and I'm like I'm just winding myself up right now So I was wondering if you had any words of wisdom or advice as
Yeah,
far as like getting
absolutely.
into that space.
Um, I feel like I want to say it's probably good for an Indian to talk about meditation because not a lot of Indians talk about meditation.
Hmm.
But when I was when I was young, I had a hellacious youth. I had a very difficult youth. Lots of anger and depression and self-hating and suicidal thoughts. And I was essentially saved by love and art and a circle of older kindred spirit art brothers and visions and my own spirituality. And I had a lot of experiences when I was a teenager. And these experiences, like, uh, like it's like every time my face was just like driven into the ground by the bullies of these times, uh, these experiences I would have would kind of lift me back up and help me see, uh, what is ever present. Help me see what is, kind of at the core of life. And it's not like at the core of life a million miles from here, but at the core of life everywhere, and also inside yourself. And these experiences kind of, culminated in a big vision I had when I was 18 years old. And after I had that vision, I started to learn how to meditate. And you might almost say spontaneously. And essentially, my mind would just very naturally become silent. And then I would find myself sitting or driving down the highway with this big silence and with no thoughts. And then with that big silence present inside of me, I would really experience life vividly and clearly in a way that inspired me when I needed to be inspired, and in a way that made me feel like living in the middle of nowhere with the deck stacked against me was not going to define my fate or define my story or define my days. And I started reading lots of books on meditation, and I started, kind of putting my inner experience together with, all these different books on meditation. And I just essentially got really good at being able to silence my mind at will. And then meditation was essentially just, sitting for a period of time in that silence. And, you know, you discover right away that that silence and that stillness, it's ever present, and it's not this special property of any human being, but it's kind of the background fabric
Hmm.
of everybody's consciousness, of everybody's awareness. And if you kind of rest in that silence and then kind of uh, melt or kind of relax into that background fabric uh, of consciousness, you kind of discover that consciousness has all of these innate qualities, and that consciousness is actually spirit. And those innate qualities are like, endless expressions of grace or endless expressions of um, the divine. And those expressions and those qualities and those characteristics are all the things that humanity has always had right under their nose, and that humanity has always valued, and that the spiritual traditions of the earth have always been trying to teach people about. And those innate qualities that kind of arise in the experience of meditation, their kindness, their compassion, their clear awareness of life, and their peace, and their care and tolerance and love. And these things feed us from within. And so when I was young, I kind of got into the habit of practicing meditation and watching these qualities kind of come up in me. And then they would feed me. And being fed, I wanted to meditate more so that these qualities could arise more. And really, that was like year 18 of this, like, I'm 39, of this 39 year-long healing journey I've been on to try to do what a lot of people are doing, and that's kind of not be in so much pain, to make sense of my wounds and maybe watch them shrink, and to feel better about my life, and to get an understanding of what was hurt inside of me that is deep enough that it enables me to be a helper to others. So that's some of the story of meditation in my life, and I practice it, I would say 89 out of every 90 days. And I just meditate in the morning, and it really uh, it just puts me in touch with what I always want to be in touch with throughout my day, and that's the spirit, as we all kind of individually define it, relate to it, and have our relationship with it.
Yeah, and in that part of the book where you talked about learning to meditate, you then talked about how you were experiencing a meditation. I don't know if I think it was later on, but where the emotion of anger came up for you, and it was like you were able to be like, okay, I'm going to go into this emotion. And I think a lot of people are afraid of meditation who aren't necessarily practiced or know that much about it, because they think they're just going to go right to that silence. But like, no, it's a lot of those emotions you don't want to
Yeah.
deal with first that come up, and like the anger, and then it's like, okay, well, why are you mad? And then it's like everything that you're mad about comes
Why are you
crashing
mad
in on
though?
you. And I found what you said so relatable in the book, because you were basically angry because like you felt like so much shit had been thrown at you in your life, and there was no one to guide you through it. And like it was just, you just had to like figure out so much of it on your own, and I related so strongly to that. And I know a lot of our listeners, I always joke that the alternative title to our podcast is Depressed in High School. um so I know a lot of our listeners like can relate to that sort of anger and sense of isolation and of being different, and like not understanding why life has to be so difficult for some people and it seems so easy for other people. And that frustration at like, why don't I have like someone like holding my hand through this and telling me it's going to be okay? And like, and your spirit, like the response was like, because you have everything you need and you had to like really draw it out in yourself. And it's one of those lessons that I have to learn over and over, when it's like, okay, every time another romantic relationship ends, or if I'm having like, difficulties with my family, and I have very like rough parental stuff, and I'm not alone in all this stuff, and I think it's like it gets reiterated like, oh yeah, because like you came on this planet to have like this experience exactly that you're going through, because every time you deal with this you uncover another aspect of yourself that ends up being your most prized possession. And so I was just wondering if you wanted to speak to that experience of sort of transcending that anger at all, or finding that, that solace and knowing that like you came in with the gift of teaching yourself things, and how that sort of like how you balance the like isolation but also the sense of peace in that.
I just feel like, man, I just feel like so many of these things, like, first off, when I had that experience, I had no idea that I would ever write about it. And that's like the great thing about art, is it like brings things we experienced like back into the forefront of our awareness, and we see like, oh man, that just like turned things in a way I didn't even understand till like right now, when I suddenly felt like writing a fucking song about it or whatever. But I feel like the Depressed High School Club, I was like a totally fully initiated member of that. And
That's why you're on the show.
I guess that's why I'm here. uh, but like anger, I had so much anger when I was young. My dad had and probably still has so much anger. Like this anger is a mountain with so many layers, and so many of those layers like originate in times before our personal experience of this life began. And it's just like we have this giant chest with like 15,000 little pieces of paper twisted up inside of them. And like, how do you work your way through the 15,000 pieces of paper and all the things they have written on them? Well, I guess you do it one at a time, right? One anger experience at a time, one depression experience at a time, one, why does this keep fucking up experience at a time. And then you find yourself with a chest that has like 10,000 little pieces of annoying paper still there, squawking and twittering and taking up more space in your house than you wanted to have, right? And I mean, I have so much faith in how our small efforts over time can reshape like the totality of ourselves, the totality of our experience of this life, and even ultimately the totality of this culture. I am all about like the power of small efforts. And I mean, the anger thing, and I mean, there was a lot in that little piece in the book. And I think something else that's important to share, that is like one of our teachings, and it was told to me by this friend of mine who's actually in the book, Shar, who introduced me to the little people. And she was like, she is like this salty, badass, intellectual. I almost want to say like Bruce Lee, Lakota elder, or something like that. And she told me that before you came into this life, you were having a conversation with your the ancestors, and you agreed to experience all of these different things when you came down here. And the agreements you made were all tied into your purpose for being alive. And there's a lot of things we can't understand, but they're playing an important part in that purpose that we are kind of carrying in the very center of ourselves. And kind of making contact with your purpose in life uh, gives you a different framework and a different context for viewing and interpreting and metabolizing and understanding all of these different experiences that a lot of people might just be walking around feeling like, why the fuck does this happen to me? Or why the fuck did that happen to me? There's something inside of us that the ancestors are tending that understands why the fuck this happened to me and why the fuck this happened to me. And that passage in the book, it was a moment where I just felt all this anger come out of me, just really like being almost like vomited into the zero gravity space of the living room. And it was an anger I was just so intimate, so familiar, on such close terms with, that was just like trailing me and infecting me since I was a little kid. And that anger in the moment I examined it, and the little people came and they helped me to understand it differently, and they helped me to see a bigger uh, picture of which
Mm.
it was a smaller thing inside of. And seeing things differently makes all the difference when it comes to like everything, you know. And those little people, they recalibrated my eyeballs in that moment, and it really helped me, you know. And I've had some people also give me feedback that that passage in the book really touched them, you know, because I think we're all carrying around a lot of the same strands of story, because we all are here to engage these beasts around us that
Mhm.
have forgotten that they're here to flower culture and not devour culture. You know, I think that's what we're here for. And so we find that we have a lot of relatable strands of soul stories, you know. So that was one of the strands of my soul story that I guess wanted to be in this book.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to open Twitter once to find everyone feels a lot of anger.
Agreed.
Eric, Eric, I feel like I've been taking up all the question space. Do you have any?
I did want to ask real quickly. In regards to the title of like your blog post, I was just curious. You say that you're a horror movie loving fan. I'm curious, like, did I would argue that, of course, all kinds of genres of movies are all stories being told, but I would say that in many ways, horror, both good and bad movies, are almost one of the purest stories of sense that are told through movies, because they kind of like harken back to like being around a campfire and this and that, as compared to like say maybe like a rom-com, which is that might be more like a story that you're telling when you're gossiping with your friends like that in real life. But like the horror movie is like one that's like a true story that's kind of like told and retold. Was that kind of like did you absorb like that kind of pop culture when you were young, and like do you have any specific memories of like any horror movies or anything like that?
Uh, Totally, totally. When I was young, all my geek, nerd, troubled friends and I, we were horror movie fans in the extreme. I wanted to make horror movies. I would still like to make like the world's most badass, native to the core, bloodfest horror movie.
Hell yeah.
I was a comic book nerd. I still read graphic novels. I mean, popular culture is full of so much soul power, and it's a wild, variegated, multidimensional, fucked up stream. But there's so much in it that speaks to so many of us. And my girlfriend and I, we watched a great horror film last night that just debuted on Netflix called His House. I just love horror movies. I think for lots of different reasons. Um, yeah, I love horror movies. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to. I think I'm trying to do 52 micro essays, and it's called 52 Reflections of a horror movie loving Ponca Indian.
Mm-hmm.
And one, I included horror movie loving because I truly love horror movies, and I listen to podcasts about horror movies. I think it really just feeds something inside of me that keeps me hungry and inspired as an artist and a writer. But I also included that because uh, part of the work Indians find themselves doing today is making Indians real to non-Indians.
Mm.
Like Indians were not mythological creatures. We're not a vanished race of the misty past. We're real. We're full bodied. We're fleshy. We're crazy. All the things that anyone you know loves. There's an Indian that loves all that stuff too. And we love horror movies actually, and I feel like lots of Indians really like horror movies. And I kind of feel like it relaxes us for reasons that I haven't fully unpacked. But
Yeah.
we just like horror movies. I love them. Thanks for asking about them so that I can, gush some
Yeah.
of my love on the genre.
Did you, out of curiosity, because you get kind of talking about like the stories that you heard from some of your elders, were there any kind of when you were younger, did you ever hear of any kind of folklore from the elders that were scary that just like really stayed with you when you were young, made you kind of look out your window at night?
um, I wanna say yes, and I mean I don't think there's stories that maybe I have the time to share here,
Mm-hmm.
but if I could take one like wood block print or one carved panel from one of those stories that comes to mind when I listen to your question and just like leave that as kind of like a teaser or like a trailer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This image comes to mind of this old man who is standing inside his house on the country road with his wife, and he looks like he's scared shitless. And he hears a knock on the door, and his wife and whoever is hearing the full version of this story already knows everything that led up to this point. So his wife says, don't answer the door.
Oh.
But he does. And when he opens the door, there's a man standing there, and he's dressed like in a black suit. And he scans down, and the man has these goat legs. And I guess that's the image I'm going to leave
Ooh.
y'all with when it comes to that question.
I like it.
Well, now I want to do we should do like a bonus episode in the future
Yeah,
where it's just
totally.
like you scaring the shit out of our listeners.
Sounds great.
I like it's either some fucked up shit or it's just like a very like mischievous goat. It's like two goats standing on each other's shoulders trying to
Wearing a
sell
trench coat, yeah.
life insurance door to door.
Totally.
They're
Totally.
selling like those knives.
Yeah, the Cutco knives or whatever.
Cutco knives, yeah.
That's the only scary piece of that story, and it's
I
only
like
scary if you tell in a scary way. Otherwise, it's exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure.
it was effective. You had me enthralled, and my cat at the same time too. My cat's on the floor right now, and it keeps wanting to like come knock into the mic stand. So it was kind of like it was like a dual like scary of like wanting to like be freaked out by it, and also not wanting my cat to hit it. So it was a very stressful moment listening to it.
Raise your blood pressure.
Yeah. Caitlin, we are kind of running a little bit close to time, but did you have a passage that you from the book that you specifically wanted to read?
Yes.
Did I catch you out,
Okay.
Carson?
A little bit, yeah.
For the listener at home, while she gets there, my cat is now
Yeah.
licking his paw. Truce has been made between the cat and I. Peace has been made. He's very happy right now. He's sitting on top of my book bag.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to you at all. It's I can't do more than one thing at the same time with my brain. So yeah, and I guess we can sort of use this to segue into the end a bit, but I would love to know maybe, well, I'll ask that after. But this is basically from the very end of the Memory of Souls, and um you're sort of you're addressing the reader a little bit directly, and you're sort of encouraging, people to have faith in their visions and to, not give up and to keep moving forward. uh so I'll start it sort of in the middle of this paragraph here, and you say, there is no simple recipe or solution or path. You just got to keep doing it until it gets done, bit by bit, little by little, day by day. Follow, and I'm gonna skip over a couple of things. Follow the stories and you will get there. Follow your dreams and you will get there. Follow the remembering and you will get there. Whatever works, works. As the years went on, I realized how much this work did not just apply to the situation of my Indian people, but to so many all over America and the world. In this day and age, we have almost all been disconnected and enculturated to be insanely and sorrowfully distant from the knowing, beauty filled memory of our soul. And so, in a sense, almost everyone is walking around deeply broken and in need of this specific kind of fixing. This brokenness, this disconnection from the earth and the spirit, this lostness is reflected in our lives and the bankrupt cultures we're living in. This work of remembering is something that desperately needs addressing all over America and a lot of the rest of the world as well. Healing, justice, decency, meeting the basic material and spiritual needs of people everywhere, human rights, peace, purpose, happiness, systemic problem solving, all of this and more is directly connected to the presence and slash or absence of this remembering in individuals and in communities and cultures. And so in this sense, this work is a matter of urgency for all. And that's, I mean, I could
Wow, I love
continue
that.
reading on forever, but, or not forever, because there's only like half a page left, but
I
for a
really,
while.
really love that.
Yeah.
And
And I mean,
that hits on so many things that Caitlin and I talk about all the time. I feel like on the show, for real. Like,
and it's so interesting to me just the timing of everything because like I I don't know how I originally found your Instagram, but that's how I found your writing originally and I liked it and I followed it for a little bit and then it was like we needed guests for November and I was like I didn't even know it was Native American Heritage Month. I just knew that like Thanksgiving is normally what is the focus of November and fuck Thanksgiving. And so I was like, you know, how can we shift the focus? And so it just like the timing of everything worked out. And then I ordered your book and I was reading it and I was like, oh, he's like totally Goth Yearbook. Like I already knew sort of from your Instagram post, but it was like so much of it was just like you're totally like well in like, you know, this community of people that listen to this show and me and Eric and our soul family and it's great to like meet someone that's like that and that you sort of just pick out of the internet ether, you know, but like something resonates so strongly and then the timing of getting that book this week where it feels very easy to sort of like I mean especially before you know Biden got the projected win like just it's so easy to slip into hopelessness, it's so easy to get um lost and upset and to feel alone in that and to like I think we need to be remembering every single day every time we wake up like we are not broken, the system is broken and we can fix it. um but we have to put that faith in ourselves that like we will find that coherence from within and that we don't need to be looking at this outside like the how fucked up things look because you know it's the like you say it's the remembering, it's the memory of our souls, like that's what's going to help us like get back on track and doing that meditation going into that silence. I know for me when I first started meditating and still sometimes a bit because my brain is just chaos and like I was always so afraid like well what if I meditate and it just everything gets worse, like what if the common thread is destructive, not coherence, not harmonious. But the more I have meditated and the more I have connected to that silence and gone into nature, it's like no, the actual like the status quo of our earth and our being is harmony, and we will always come back to that when we sort of take our attention away from all the outer bullshit that's going on. So that's our hour and almost a half long ad for The Memory of Souls by Cliff Taylor. Cliff, I would love to know, first of all, any final thoughts. You're welcome. We don't have like a specific time cut up, but I also want to know if you want to direct people towards any sort of like I know a lot of our listeners are always looking for ways to get involved, ways to
yeah.
educate themselves, ways to make connections. If you even just want to plug like how to buy your book, that's fine too. But yeah, final thoughts.
Um, I guess my book's available on Amazon. Uh, just type in The Memory of Souls, Cliff Taylor, and you can find it there. But I feel like Indians are familiar with a certain kind of homework, maybe. And it's the kind of homework where you're asked to do one thing, maybe even it seems kind of like a simple thing, And by the time you get done doing it, or by the time you kind of accomplish it, you've kind of found yourself doing a whole lot of other stuff. And maybe the point was never the one task assigned, but it was all the other stuff that you wound up doing in getting that task done. So in that spirit, I would say, in honor of Native American Heritage Month, any listener who wants to be a part of the healing of indigenous culture in their local community and in their kind of town and state, you know, I would say try to have a heartfelt conversation with a native person and set a high bar for yourself, and don't feel like you're done until you have really had a truly heartfelt conversation uh, with a native person, with a local indigenous person, and help Indian people become real to everyone. Help Indian people become real in the hearts of all Americans. Help Indian people become more real to yourself than they were before you had that bona fide, heartfelt conversation with a bona fide Indigenous person. And then, consider your homework done.
I uh, I do want to point out real quickly too, just like one thing, like I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up on this episode. And I was talking to Caitlin about right before we went on, is that Arizona, which became one of the states that this election, one of the states that was really highlighted. There's 22 tribes that are in the state of Arizona, and there's this map that shows like where they're all located, and you can all they showed on the same Arizona map a couple days later, once Arizona was called, where all the blue votes came to swing Arizona to Biden. And when you know it, every single location where those 22 tribes were, that was exactly where all the blue spots were on the map that brought that state over to Biden. Um, I think that it wouldn't be far fetched to say that Native American people really helped out on this election, and we definitely owe it to them, amongst a million other reasons, to go and have a heartfelt chat with them and bring visibility to them and have a heartfelt connection with them and allow them to be seen, for the reasons that they should be in America.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And any uh, any narrative where natives become a cherished, piece of it is, medicine for everyone. And thanks for having me on, and thanks for talking to me about my book. And I feel like, I was so depressed in high school that my presence here at your table was just meant to be. And I'm so happy that we got to have this time together.
Yeah. Welcome to our Goth Yearbook class of 2020.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I apologize if you did mention it, but again, the website too, I encourage everyone to go check out his website, cliffponca.com, CLIFFPONCA.com. Please go check it out. A lot of those great kind of blog posts are there that we've been referencing throughout the night. And again, thank you so much for coming on our show, Cliff. We will definitely have you back on, and hopefully we can continue that fucking frightening little story teaser you gave us.
Yeah, Eric wants you to scare him more.
Otherwise, Caitlin, as always, thank you for being the co-host, the mo-host. I'm going to say goodnight, guys.
All right, good night. Bye.
Bye.